My name is Fred Cook, and I drive school bus.
My name is Leanne Murchie, and I'm a school bus driver for TCAPS. It's been a very wonderful experience.
When I first hired in, one of the previous bus drivers told me that this particular job, driving school bus, is the best job on earth. So I immediately took to it, and I have to agree that this is one of the best jobs that anyone can do.
What prompted me in the very beginning, I have a college degree, and she said, "You're in the safest vehicle in the world on the road." So I thought, well, I'm gonna try. Because I would be on the same time schedule as my own children. And when they were off, I was off. When holidays, I was there. So it was the best of both worlds. TCAPS offers jobs elsewhere within the system.
Between routes, I used to, for 12, 13 years, I did lunch duty over at East Middle School, and now I paint.
They're real good about finding people the hours that they need during the course of the day to make the job great. We have Mesa Insurance. The whole district has it. It's awesome. It's the best health insurance. We offer a 401k. There's a sign-on bonus. It's a win-win situation.
The most important thing, I think, coming to work at TCAPS is you understand that you are part of a team. It's a part of a collective. It's not just bus drivers and then versus teachers. It's not that. We all are in this thing called education together.
If a person likes kids, generally likes kids, this is a perfect job.
So I'm talking to kids all day, and that experience is really heartwarming, and I continue to understand what it means to be a part of the community.
You are an educator. You have a chance to touch children's lives every day. And don't think that you don't. You are such an important part of the wheel of education.
Let's see. We'd like to welcome the audience and thank you for attending. Viewers may watch Board of Education meetings and board curriculum meetings live on tcaps.net/board. Recorded meetings may be viewed on demand at the same address. Before we get started, just a little shout out to our downhill alpine skiers. Yesterday was a great day. Traverse City West girls won states, Division I states. TC West boys were runner-up, and then flip-flopped on Traverse City Central side. So Traverse City Central boys won first in states, and girls won runner-up. So just a shout out to them. Tough sport, and man, I was a timer yesterday, and sitting watching these kids like at the top of the hill. I mean, I couldn't even see the course because it's, and just, it was pretty amazing. So awesome. Shout out to those kids. So anyway.
Cool.
Yeah, and Traverse City in general. This is years in a row of kind of holding those leads. So anyway, we'll move into public comment. Doesn't look like we have any public comment, so we'll keep on keeping on. First procedural item, we are at the draft meeting minutes portion of the agenda. Are there any changes to the meeting minutes? I didn't see any. Okay. So hearing no changes, the minutes will remain as posted. We'll move on to Miss Heidi, who is
here, so I'm taking hunting
okay,
right now. So there, yeah.
District course catalogs.
There are no updates this month.
Hey, look
It's
at
easy.
That was an easy update. All right, then right on into field trip requests.
Yeah, so this is a field trip for the March 11th board meeting. This is a trip for the band, and this is replacing the recently approved trip to Rome and Venice. More affordable for students who go to New York City. The students are going to have an opportunity to participate in a Broadway show, the New York Philharmonic, see some museums, and be able to perform at Carnegie Hall. So really exciting for our kids. And this is just before spring break, March 15th through the 19th. The travel costs are listed, and obviously a link to a more detailed overview of the trip also available. We'll have 2 staff members going, and then 8 district-approved volunteers as well.
When did Oh, March
Yep,
15th to the
15th to
19th. Okay, perfect. Okay,
So that will be on the March 11th board meeting.
excellent.
And Rome makes more sense actually than going to Rome. The Rome would have been fun, but by the time you get there and try to get your
Experience it
head
all.
in 4 days and then turn around and come back.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah, well, good. Well, we'll move that onto the consent calendar for the full board. Okay, moving on to informational items. The board curriculum learning series, which is behavior and emotional support team, the best team.
Yes, we are really excited to update you on this. So when we first started operationalizing the strategic plan, we became very clear that we needed to have some teams with people closest to the work. Much of the strategic plan, as you know, has a component of mental health supports, improving bullying and harassment in the district, and other social emotional learning efforts. And so this team was one of the teams that was established, and behavior and emotional support team. These are primarily social workers and counselors who are in the district. It started off with Kirsten Jones Morgan facilitating and leading that group. And I'm excited to have you get to know one of our newest team members who's also rocking it out, Misty Warner, in just a second. But some of the challenges that we faced immediately were just recognizing how much we needed to integrate our community resources to be able to address all of the needs. That the school district could, while we had a lot of amazing resources, we could not do it alone. And it started with a conversation last fall with a prosecutor who notifies us when we have situations with students that go through the prosecutor's office. And it was simply, how do we do this better so that we can coordinate efforts and communicate resources and proactively address some of the concerns. And so that meeting started, there was a first meeting last fall with Kirsten and I, the prosecutor, and I think maybe 2 or 3 other people. That group, called Meeting of the Minds, has been meeting monthly since then, and is, I don't know, what are we up to, 25 maybe? 25 community leaders from different organizations who've been coming together to try to expedite and coordinate this for students. So I know we're going to hear more about that, but I wanted to give you kind of the backstory of how that started, and excited that this is happening and that we have so many willing partners saying, hey, we have the capacity to help you do this. We just need to know how to engage. Like, what does this look like when we come into your district? Also looking at opportunities to the 3 subcommittees, which you'll hear about today from this group. How do we coordinate beyond the school day? Like, what are the legal things we need to do? How do we open a building up, per se? Like, what does that look like so that we could get students and families who may have transportation concerns or other issues where they can't get to, across town? And so you'll hear a little bit more about that today. And so with that, I'd like to turn it over to anybody. Any questions on just the kind of the backstory to this point? Okay. With that, I'd like to turn it over to, I think, Kirsten, who's going to introduce our newest rock star on the team, Misty Warner.
So good morning. I just squeaked in here. I apologize for being late. I'm getting used to my new commute. So I do have the absolute pleasure of reintroducing you because I think you've met Misty before. But just to speak a little bit about the position of the Director of Whole Child Systems. That is one of many new positions that we have in the district. And as Kristen said, we really were looking to have a person that could help spearhead the initiatives related to the strategic plan, of which there are many that relate specifically to increasing the social and emotional and mental health of our students. So I had the pleasure of working with Misty when I was the principal at Blair Elementary. And my standard response about Misty is that I once was a school social worker. I thought I was a pretty good school social worker. And then I started working with Misty, and I was like, oh, that's what a really good school social worker looks like. She's exceptional at what she does. And one of the things that we talked a lot about while working at Blair was, how do we bring this to scale? How do we bring some of the systems that you're implementing and some of the really significant knowledge that you have and make sure that all kids in our district are able to experience that. So Misty is a person that was a mental health clinician. She served as a supervisor for CMH at one point, was trained at Western Michigan through their trauma center, has worked in our district for 11 years, worked for 10 years at Blair, which is one more year than I did, which gives her a lot of credibility in our district in terms of really understanding the nuance of what it means to be trauma informed, and to not just have that be language, but to have that be practice. So with that, I'll also speak a little bit about, we have had really an exceptional year in terms of recruitment and hiring of staff. And we talked about this before, but we've had, Misty's position is new. We've had 4 new hires as interventionists, behavior interventionists. And again, the distinction that we're making between our behavior interventionists and our behavior specialists is that our interventionists are bachelor's degreed practitioners who are actively engaged in working on their master's degree. So we've been able to hire 4 new positions. We also have the school success liaisons. Those are very similar in terms of their educational requirements. The difference is that they work for NMCAA and are placed in our buildings. So we have 4 sites that have school success liaisons. That's something that Dr. Van Wagner was instrumental in bringing into the district. Our hope is to grow that program with NMCAA. Ultimately, it would be ideal if we had a school success liaison in every building. And their role in the building is very similar to the behavior interventionists in that they are helping to triage some of that low-level behavior, but also to make very intentional connections to families. So part of the school success liaison program is that they do home visits. They carry a caseload, and they are really focusing on ensuring that kids are attending school on a regular basis. Our interventionists tend to have more of a slant of that kind of mental health focus. They're working a lot with behavior plans. They're helping support sort of our most behaviorally challenging kids in the district. So that's kind of the distinction between those 2 roles. But we've been able to hire 8 new staff. We also have been able to increase our counselors. So we were able to add a 3rd counselor over at East Middle School. We have 3 new hires at that specialist level, which is that master's degree level. Most are social workers, although we have hired 1 that has an MA in clinical counseling. And then we also have Misty's position. In addition to that, our coaches, our instructional coaches, some of them really do help focus on behavior in the classroom. So that's another layer. While we didn't have any new staff, I wanted to introduce them as part of our whole team when we're thinking about that comprehensive approach to supporting kids.
One thing that I just want to add with this, when we talk about funding, a lot of this has come through very specific categoricals through the State Aid Act. Also, you take Misty's position, for instance, that's money that actually went to the ISD, that we've been able to get support for some of these positions, including Misty's from the ISD. So, you know, it's been built up in the budget over the last couple of years of a real influx of dollars from the state in these areas. And, you know, we're hopeful that these positions stay funded from the state in the budget, but it's the unknown a little bit, you know, from that standpoint. So while we've done a lot, you know, it's been on those very specific categoricals. A lot of people ask, well, is that general fund dollars? You know, that, you know, could, you know, maybe just hiring more teachers would be the answer or whatever, but they're very prescriptive from the state on what those dollars are for. And so almost every one of these positions that you see here, like counselor would be one that's probably is a general fund, but for the most part, all of these come from those specific behavior and mental health categoricals from the state of Michigan.
And does the state track any of the successes that come from that money? I mean, do they ever reach back out and say, okay, from the funding we gave you?
I don't know they reach out, but we have to give specifics as far as incidences in schools. We have to document that and submit that to the state of all of those, you know, if there is some type of situation of where there is a a restraint, that is, by trained people in a very specific situation, we have to report that. A lot of these things then, so they are analyzing that data from the backside to be able to see if there's some differences that way. But, we probably are doing more like with some discipline referrals, and I know KP is gonna talk probably some about that. We internally are looking at more of that. But from the state, there's that element where they collect it. I don't know how much of an analysis is happening, but we are required to, put quite a bit of that in.
We also, some of the grants have some pretty specific requirements at the end of the year that we have to comply with. So number of students seen, type of work that was done, individual versus group. So it depends on the funding source, that we have kind of a variety of ways in which we have to report out how those dollars were spent. In terms of effectiveness, I think to John's point, oftentimes it's sort of a one-way communication. And we're gonna spend a little bit of time, or Misty's gonna spend some time talking about one of the things that we're really focusing on is establishing those common metrics to be able to look at effectiveness. We wanna be able to make sure that we can determine our impact in a way that is clear and measurable.
So I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit more about the BEST team and some of the great work that this team has been doing. So we have representatives from different agencies within the community, and then we're really striving to get a rep from each building, and we're getting close. We have, there's 3 different subcommittees that are comprised of members of the whole BEST team. The first one that we're going to talk about today is Group 1. So this is mental health supports.
We worked really hard on these names.
Yeah.
They're
Group
very,
one.
yeah, Group 1.
This is Group 1. And you'll see that there's a specific goal, and then we have some specific initiatives that we're working on, and I just want to share some of the things that we've been able to do in each of these subcommittees so far. So one of them being professional learning is we worked really hard to get our counselors all trained in trails. And I have linked in under professional learning if you want more information on what this entails. So, but
Can you open that, Kristen?
It says no access.
Oh, that doesn't work very well. Okay, I'll give you access, and it just describes what each one of those committees are.
yeah, what each one of those trainings
Or
are. that
trainings,
that
yep.
they've been to. Yep. And then, so our counselors have all been trained in trails. Our mental health professionals have all been trained in collaborative and proactive solutions, which is a framework that we utilize and approach when working with students that really focuses on collaboratively solving the problems with students together, and then looking at lagging skills and unsolved problems. And then restorative practices. We've had almost all of our mental health team have been trained in restorative practices. We've been working on partnering with local stakeholders, physicians, and mental health providers. One thing that I did when I got into this position was I sent out a coordination of care letter that I will pass around to all of you, that just introduces myself and lets our local agencies know what our team can do to help coordinate with them, especially the physician's offices, community mental health, in the care of our students. So we looked at developing common assessments and then how, administering those, compiling some data with interventions that we're utilizing within the school system to help support students, and then getting that out to our providers so that we're working in the same direction to support students. And then those common intakes that are listed that we have kind of come up with, and our team has worked together to identify. And we've worked with local physicians and different key point people within the physicians' offices or community mental health to say, what do you need? What data do you need from us? What assessments can we do to help you? So when our kiddos are coming in to receive services, that we're kind of ahead of the game. You have information on what we're seeing within the school system. You have information on the interventions and the services that we're providing for them.
Can I just share one thing about the partnering with local stakeholders? So Kristen alluded to some of this as well. One of the things that I think is really imperative is to recognize that we have a number of kids, and it's not a huge number, but it's significant enough where that are really struggling with significant mental health issues. And it impacts their ability to learn, but it often impacts people around them and the students around them. And so this piece of what we are attempting to address is really critical when it comes to clearing the debris for kids to be able to be present and available for learning. And when you're working with kids that have significant history, significant exposure to chronic stress, it doesn't have to be, we call them big T's, big traumas, right? It can be just the habitual exposure to not necessarily knowing if you're going to have a dinner that night consistently, day after day, not knowing if your car's going to start in the morning and you're going to be able to get to school on time. The impact of that, I think, is profound. And so being able to ensure that our team is accessing as many resources as possible is foundational in actually making sure kids can learn. The other part of that with the professional learning is we really wanted to ensure that anyone that is working in our district in this capacity has a very solid baseline of skill level themselves. So we're going to do everything we can, and Misty has been working tirelessly with people in buildings, demonstrating, modeling, setting up systems to say, our first line of defense are our social workers, counselors, behavior interventionists, school liaisons. Let's make sure they are as skilled as possible. And then let's make sure that we are partnering with people when that need supersedes our capacity to meet, and make sure that we've pulled in all of those folks that can help support our students in the most effective way possible. So this particular, group one really is a group that is, and you'll see the interplay of all of these, but we don't get to learning unless we have ensured that kids are able to be present and have the capacity to begin to be available for learning. So this is a really critical part. Obviously, it relates to our strategic plan goal about mental health, but it also directly relates to the idea of increasing student achievement, because all of this has interplay with one another.
Misty, do you want to talk a little bit more about the Meeting of the Minds
I
vision?
was gonna say,
just what the groups.
the Meeting of the Minds has been instrumental in really helping us to look at those barriers of when it comes to access to services. So we have some really key players at the table, and being able to kind of share out what services that each of those agencies provide and what they're working on, and then incorporate that into kind of what we can do for our students and how we can increase our coordination and increase that access to care. So when we meet monthly, we have kind of an agency share out. Each representative will share out what they're doing within their agency, what is new or what is upcoming, what they're trying to implement. We share out what we're doing, and then we really look at how we can kind of coordinate and then increase getting either our kids to services within a timely manner or getting services out to our kids. So really working together, it's been that has been a kind of a game changer in knowing what is out there and working in the same direction. I think a lot of times there are different pockets of people doing amazing things, but sometimes that communication piece is everybody's working hard and working fast, and so this has been a great way to bring everybody together and kind of communicate and get on the same page.
In addition to the doors open to the court systems, it's really a proactive approach. So in terms of like a discipline hearing where we're trying to, obviously change behavior, we're looking at options, and I think you're going to talk more about this too, but we're looking at options as a district of how can we offer, with the support of these agencies, options for students that are not just putting students out of school. Well, while that's applicable, that we're all often looking at like how do we change the behavior, like what does that look like? And these agencies are allowing us to be able to do that proactively and then opening more communication with the courts so that we can, better support students when they're here and, understand what's going on. And I also just think some of just the proactive approach of doing this in advance before we even get to a discipline hearing. So we're looking for both, right? What can we do in a discipline hearing, and what are the options for students to be able to restore them back to TCAPS with a changed behavior? And then what are the ways that we can proactively do this? We're actually looking at, the police department brought forward, and they sit at the table, are you going to talk about the QRT process?
The coordination of care
Yeah.
team. So
Okay.
I can touch base
Go
on
ahead,
that a little
yeah.
bit. Yeah. So they run a program where and this is kind of where we were going with Meeting of the Minds. So there's lots of different key players sitting at the table and looking at, again, those barriers to services. And so they come in and they coordinate and they talk about individuals that are struggling, and they each kind of go around and talk about what services their agency is providing for this individual, or what services that they can try to get this individual into, and they work together to be able to do that. So we are looking at how do we kind of bring that work that they're doing within our school. How do we kind of create a coordination of care? We're looking at calling it the coordination of care team, but bringing students and families that are struggling to get to services, and talking about them with these other agencies, and looking at how we can link them and work together. And again, being in the same room and focusing on some of the same needs and families can be pretty critical in getting them into services and care in a timely manner, which can be the downfall, is that there are services, it just takes a while to access them. So we're looking at working with them. We actually had Jennifer Holm from the Sheriff's Department. She's a social worker there who's been instrumental in creating this team. She came and talked to our best team and was able to provide them with information and look at how they got that up and running. And so we've been trying to work through that and see what we can do to do the same.
And obviously, the Sheriff's Department is doing this with adults, right? With adults with addiction,
Right.
homelessness, mental health challenges. So there's a whole other layer on how to do this for students, and how do we, confidentially, everybody has their own rules and handcuffs that they're required to do, but how do we do this collectively, and how do we figure out how to get permission and all of that in advance so that we can best support kids and families? So it's another layer of complication, not one that can't be overcome, but certainly different challenges than with adults.
The only thing that concerns me is it seems like it has a lot of potential in behavior modification. And that's all based off of value systems that may not be shared across some of the families. And I wonder if that presents a problem as well. Does that make
Your
sense to you?
question was that you're concerned that,
Can you hammer every kid into basically certain defined molds that you determine? And there are some kids that maybe they should not be hammered into that
Yeah.
mold.
So actually, a lot of the professional learning that we have sent our team to is based around collaboratively working with students and looking at what skills they might be lacking versus the behavior in general, right? The behavior is just the signal, and we know that that's just they're telling us that something's wrong. So a lot of these tools and these models are not focused at all on behavior modification. It's actually the opposite. They're focused on looking at what skills those kids are lacking. How do we teach them those skills? What are the barriers? Why aren't they meeting those expectations? And how can we provide them with the resources and teach those students the skills to be able to be successful and help them meet those expectations? So a lot of this work is not behavior mod. It's focused on the lagging skills and unsolved problems and expectations, and really getting down there. Kind of, if you look at that iceberg, right? What's below the surface that we need to work on? We know that the tip is just the signal. It's the behavior. It's what the kids are, telling us that things aren't okay. So kind of getting below that level and looking at what they may need to be successful.
Yeah, I just, I know there are a lot of different behaviors and cultures, and I just kind of don't want to see us be detrimental to some of that.
yeah. I think
Because we've done that before in our history.
sure. And I think the other critical piece to this that, when you're talking about students and you're talking about behavior and you're talking about mental health, it's also important not to pathologize things that are actually developmentally appropriate. And I think when we're talking about, 5-year-old children who are really, really active, that doesn't mean that there's actually something wrong with them. That just means they're 5, right? And we're expecting them to behave in a way that they might be ill-equipped to behave in, which is why programs like our junior kindergarten are so fundamental, right? It's allowing for just what is a natural stage of human development to be in place. So one thing I can assure you, Beth, is that nothing that you see related to professional learning is focusing on traditional behavior modification where you are using consequences and reinforcements to shape behavior. There is a place for that. I mean, certainly that happens all across. We are constantly providing feedback to children. Love how you're sitting there quietly waiting for your turn. That's shaping behavior. What we're talking about when we're talking about really working with more of those more intensive kids, we know behavior modification is not actually the go-to methodology. In fact, it often backfires. And unless we are willing to work collaboratively with that student to kind of unpack what this experience is like from his or her point of view, and unless we deeply understand that, we are unlikely to get anywhere. But that work takes time and effort and energy, and oftentimes these are kids that are sort of on fire, and they are impacting the learning of themselves and others. And so there's an urgency behind the work as well. It's just not got an easy answer, but I don't think anyone is in any way attempting to say we can reward and consequence kids that have experienced significant trauma into behaving, nor do we think that that's always the most effective approach for most of us, right?
It's not only that, though. It's also in values, and family background as well. So I think it's very, very complex.
I think what I'm hearing is, and we hear people in the community say focus on reading, writing, and arithmetic. To quit trying to counsel and do some of these more social emotional work that needs to be done. But what is, in my opinion, is lacking is that if there is the trauma, like you said, that's all packed in, that they're not going to be able to do reading, right? They're not going to be able to do that unless you address that. Is that what you're saying? Is just that difference of people that believe?
No.
Okay.
Not exactly. I guess I can't clearly see. I don't have. Well, being around some of the little kids at Blair, and the personalities, and you're right. Some kids have a lot more go power than others. And I don't know if it's all skill set. There's a lot of individualism there too, but I could be wrong. I would hate to have some of these kids that actually could become amazing dampened down so that amazing ability isn't available when it's needed.
But isn't that why our teachers are our teachers and our leaders are our leaders, is because they are with
We're all
these children
human.
to be able to, they're not gonna put a lid on somebody and put them in a mold. Everybody is so different. My 2 children, and I have 2, are so different. And so you have to support and both of them in their own way, let alone a class of 20, So I think that's why we have to allow our teachers to, get the tools they need, which is what we're talking about, and our social workers and our counselors, and get the tools that they need, so when they do have the interactions with kids that are not appropriate or are acting out, so to speak, that then the systems are in place to address those issues.
And I want to chime in here. As a person whose culture often presses against this larger culture here, as you know, we consider our people the oppressed culture here. So I understand what you're saying, and I want to point that out. And I do also believe that when children come to school here, they do need the skills to know how to get along and to learn, even if our values are different. So it's everybody whose values are different need to be able to be in the same space and work together. And I think that's what they're getting at is it's like a base level of skill that you need to be able to learn, you know, and to get along with your space. But it doesn't mean it's going to like dampen their spirit, right? They're still going to be who they are, and they still might come from different circumstances or different values. You can't change what's happening at home necessarily. You can only change what happens here, you know, or at least work with it. And so I want to say I understand what you're saying, and I also think that that restorative look at it is appropriate, because that also allows an understanding of the whole child rather than the boxed child, if that makes sense.
All right, and so our
And
next.
doing a push-up for restorative stuff, because that actually came from my people.
But your people is not one people. Your people is incredibly diverse.
Yes, I know
Expect
this.
that as well.
Thank you.
And a lot of the work that we're doing, a lot of the approaches and the frameworks that we utilize, it really focuses on developing that relationship and connecting with kids and giving them a voice. So just want to kind of throw that out there too. But moving on to our next, our group 2, preventing bullying and harassment. So we've done a lot of work in this group on really looking at, so we have some we have a social emotional learning program that's running K-5 right now. It's called Second Step. And we're looking at kind of vetting out some programs for our 6-8. We're looking at, I think there's 4 different programs, but really kind of focusing on maybe carrying Second Step through. This is a Tier 1 social emotional learning program. So that's one thing that we've been really focusing on. We are also, within our Second Step K-5, they've added a bullying and prevention component to that. So looking at when do we launch that, we need to get our teachers trained to be able to to be able to teach that. So looking at the scope and sequence and when we can get that implemented. We have also been working on that diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging work. So really looking at some formats and some tools to help teachers and staff in that work.
Misty, just a quick question. Did from what I've heard, that middle school has had more behavioral issues lately. Is that why you feel like just that there needs to be a program at that level for middle schoolers, do you think?
I think we've been kind of looking at programming since the beginning of the year, so it's not just
Okay.
Because of that. We've been really kind of focusing on what may fit best in that 6-8 area. So I think that we've been kind of working on that prior, and
Okay.
hopefully maybe
Got it.
getting some of this Tier 1 curriculum in there will help to kind of cut down on some of that.
Got it. Okay.
What does SEL mean?
Social emotional learning.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I didn't want to guess.
Sorry. Yes.
And then,
Yes,
Yeah,
we do.
yeah. and then would it be true that that 6 to 8 grade group is because of the effect of COVID? Is there some correlation to that? They were the little ones coming up in that.
Or that's when the hormones start
We
changing.
Yeah, that
we
too.
just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, to be honest with you, I think you can come to some, conclusions, but data-wise, I think that we've seen some uptick for sure. Is it the isolation? Is it, personal theory is yes, but, of anything that data-wise can absolutely point to it, no. So, anecdotally,
And hormones.
that's right. I mean, middle school's at tough grade. Middle school's at tough grade for a lot of kids, and
It is.
transition is hard, that's something we've looked at is that sixth grade, fifth grade to sixth grade transition, same the eighth grade to ninth grade transition. But that middle school, when you talk about some of the behaviors and the bullying, that is the age that we see consistently. We've seen the most reports in that element. And so that's where we're really trying to figure out some things, including, things where we've seen some of our, racial hate speech even, with some kids, that's the area we are right now trying to focus on. How do we figure out how to teach and address that, restorative, other things to do. That's a big bulk at that middle school level.
And then our final group is Group 3, supporting behaviorally challenging students. And we've been doing some work here, again, in developing and implementing those systems for data collection. So I've been out in buildings a lot, really looking at needs and kind of helping to implement ways that we can begin to collect data and then compile that data and get it out to local providers so they're aware of kind of what's going on. One of the things that we are tracking is time out of class due to behaviors. So looking at, the interventions that we're utilizing and what we're working with and the supports that we're providing with students. And, still, if they're unable to maintain in the classroom successfully, what does that look like? We're running some in-class behavior data tracking documents that's broken up in half an hour increments. So we're able to see how the student is presenting and doing within the classroom setting as well. So being in the buildings kind of helping to implement and look at those. Another thing that we're working on with this committee is to develop a team and look at when we could possibly offer restorative conferences in lieu of disciplinary hearings. We've formed an ad hoc team. We've been meeting. I have met with Bill Boyle, who is kind of a guru in restorative practices and restorative conferences. He's been here to Traverse City and done some trainings to some of our staff here. So we're really looking at working through that process and when and where we might be able to implement those conferences. And there's kind of a continuum with restorative practices. So we have been starting restorative circles, really looks at building that community and giving kids a voice, utilizing the same common language elementary, pulling that into middle school, having restorative conversations. So working through kind of mediating and working through situations where there has been some conflict and helping kids be able to do that. And there's some specific questions and language that is utilized within that restorative conversation. And then looking at possibly a restorative conference district team to provide that in lieu of or prior to the disciplinary hearings. So that's been going pretty well, and we're moving forward in that area. And then again, trauma-informed training for staff. So some of our staff that have been trained in some of those trauma-informed programs and practices, we are looking at kind of the next step. A couple of them are going through a 5-week skill enhancement course to be able to kind of sharpen up and get, a little more comfortable in implementing in some of those areas.
So one of the things we just wanted to share was just how do students access support? So we really are, there's a number of ways that kids can seek out help with one of our service providers. Sometimes that happens through our task process, which is TCAP's version of a child study team, but in essence it's a group that is addressing student concerns, and that's usually a standing committee that a teacher has a concern. It could be academic, it could be social and emotional. They bring that concern forward to that team, and sometimes that's a way that students are accessing our supports. Probably the most common way that kids are accessing this kind of help would be through the student support document. That's something that Misty has been working with buildings on developing. that's just a Google Doc that a kid comes in, teacher might notice, student seems to be struggling a bit this morning, or the student might articulate it, you know, my dog got hit by a car, I don't really want to be here. We'd put that student's name in the student support document, and that document is referenced throughout the day by the different either interventionists or specialists. That allows our kids to know, I have seen you, I have heard you, we're gonna address this. As soon as we're able to, somebody's gonna come and help you, right? And your job right now is to get back on track if you can, and let's start getting back to learning. So a lot of recess complaints get put on there. So things that sometimes are pretty all-consuming for kids, but it's a nice way to say, we're gonna get to that. Because for every human, right, everything that they're going through feels emergent and crisis-like. And they want it addressed right then. This has been a really effective tool, I would say, to say to kids, listen, clearly if it's something that reaches a certain threshold that we know the student needs immediate assistance, we wouldn't put it in that student support document. But for some of those low level, particularly things related to like something that happened with soccer and rules, right? And now it's permeating the classroom. We're gonna put it on that doc. We're gonna get somebody to talk to you about it. Right now, we're gonna focus on math. Clearly, referrals from teachers are another way that students access that support. And parents often will call and say, hey, I'm really worried. My kid's having a really hard time coming. They're experiencing a lot of anxiety at night, thinking about coming into the school building. So those are some of the most prominent ways that kids are able to access help. The other thing that we've talked a lot about is just that measurement of success. So these are some of the things that we're really looking to, again, make standard across the board. So that increased time in classroom in front of curriculum, that was always our primary goal at Blair, was our number one thing we were tracking. How often are kids out of class because they are not capable of remaining present for whatever reason. And so our goal was always 100% of the time that curriculum was being presented, kids were going to be present. So we are watching that very closely. We have worked with our tech team to develop a pretty sophisticated way of just tracking that. And we can go through month by month and say the student, went from missing 9 hours of instruction and is now down to 3 and is now down to 45. So that's the kind of data that we're looking to collect to be able to determine the impact of our interventions.
What if the kid simply doesn't like the curriculum that's being presented at the time?
I think that's often, not often, but that is at times a reality. It is not particularly inspiring to learn about long division. Right? Like most humans don't sit down and go, this is awesome. What the difference is that most kids have the ability to override that initial feeling of you've got to be kidding me, and they can persevere. And we have a number of kids who really are lagging the skill to kind of override that initial response. It's not that this is the difference between want and have ability, right? Like, I don't actually think there are too many people that want to learn long division. It just isn't how we're wired. We're actually wired in a way to sort of push back against things that feel hard. It's the ability to override that feeling that we have to develop in kids. So I don't know your point of how are we making sure that we are presenting things in the most engaging, in the most enriching way possible. That is a fair question. And that is something that I think our teachers have to wrestle with. Would you want to be a kid in your room right now? Right? Like, that's a good question to always be asking teachers. And I can tell you that even our most dynamic, exceptional teachers are still going to have kids that struggle with that ability to tolerate the distress it feels to do something hard. Learning is hard work. What we're asking of kids every day, it's hard. And when your cup is kind of already full, that might be the thing that kind of pushes you over the edge. So it is important that our lessons are dynamic, inventive, creative, hit all kinds of ways that kids learn. It's also important to recognize that you can bring all that to the table and you're still going to have kids that are like, there's not a lot of ways you can make long division that glamorous. There is, at some point, the rubber hits the road and we just got to do some work, and work doesn't always feel good.
I was thinking more. I was talking to a middle schooler, and she doesn't like the stories. You know, they don't speak to her.
Yep.
You know, so the long division she doesn't mind,
Sure.
of all things. But it's the stories. She feels that they're just kind of pointed, too pointed. You know. But anyway, maybe she's just an odd one.
Well, we all have our strengths
Sure.
and our weaknesses, you know,
Yeah.
like where some things come easy to others and some don't, so, you know, yeah.
Or your interest level
Yeah. That's
goes
right.
in different ways.
Yeah.
So these are just some of the things that we're continuing to work through, is how do we find accessibility for outside agencies. We're looking specifically, we have a program with the Child Advocacy Center where if a student has gone to the Child Advocacy Center for any reason, we just get a notice from them that says, hey, this student needs to be handled with care. We don't get any more detail than that. And it just gives us a heads up to say to that teacher, you know what, Shelley might be having a little bit of a hard time today. We're going to give her some grace. If she needs a little extra support, know that that's where she's at. We don't have any detail as to why, other than this is a student that we know requires a little extra support. We're hoping to potentially pilot something very similar to that with DHS and law enforcement. So if a family, you know, we have kids that come to school, we have no idea that there was a major domestic that night. Police were at their house till 2 o'clock in the morning, and we're expecting that kid to walk in and just be. So a little bit of heads up for all of us is really helpful in not making it worse. We can't always make it better, but we can sure as heck not make it worse. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at addressing. And then, of course, always those gaps in services. How do we connect kids to the right people at the right time? And that's still a lot of our work to come.
One, just shout out for Lunch Buddies. I'm a lunch buddy at Blair, and it's really great because some days I will walk in and the lunch aides or the teacher aides, or they'll say, you know what, so-and-so just needs a little extra attention today. They're just having a, you know, and that's when it's really nice to be able to say, hey, can I sit by you, Lunch Buddy? And like, they just need that extra support, and that's Lunch Buddy program is so great for that. Sometimes there's nothing and everyone's, you know, fine, but sometimes
think
they'll
that-
pull me aside and just say,
Yes.
hey, so-and-so just needs a little, and I don't need to know what, I don't need to know why, but just that little extra attention might make that student feel extra special, so.
That's so critical because, you know, a lot of times we feel like some of these kids are, they're like a bucket with a little hole in it, and we're pouring as much as we can, but it's draining out pretty quickly. And so having someone, sometimes what people just need is someone to say, I see you, I value you, I hear you, tell me how you're doing. And that's hard to do in a school setting when there's lots and lots of kids. So having lunch buddies, having people that come in and are just fresh, and your only job is just to like that kid. You don't have to make them do anything, right? That's a real gift that you offer kids when you do something like that.
It's cool.
And having worked since the 1990s in the juvenile and child protection and as a judge, I was going to say the educators are so important in that process because we do have kids coming out of CAC or incidents who actually come in and the first person they talk to is often an educator. So if you let them know, hey, heads up, then they can put their child investigative interviewer skills in case that happens. Not that you have to go look for it, but in case the child decides to talk to you, you know how to make that happen the right way.
Good. Good stuff. We asked questions throughout the
questions?
whole series, so any other
Feeling good?
questions?
Oh, always.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Misty. Thanks for being here. That was really great, and Kirsten too. Lots of good stuff. So thank you. Okay, we'll move into the listening tour survey update with Kristen Perkowski.
So, as you know, back in December, we partnered with Digital Promise and Learner Center Collaborative to have both a listening tour in our buildings and also a perception survey. This was to gather multiple perspectives from students, families, educators, and community members to better define and understand the equity challenges that we face, specifically challenges by historically and systematically excluded groups. So we were also, one of the other goals of the tour was to amplify the voices and perspectives of different members of the TCAPS community regarding solution ideas that could potentially address equity challenges in education, and then support the leadership team in identifying action steps that could be taken to further improve education equity in our district. So we received the results, which you have some hard copies of that on your table, back in early January. And since then, we have met with our entire administrative principal team and asked them to, A, look at the data, and B, start making some recommendations based on the data that they were seeing for both students and teachers. We then shared that information with our culture and climate team, who last year looked at our perception data, and then also we had them look at this as well. We did not share the results from the principals. We wanted them to just look at the data and give us their own perspectives. From there, and I'll share the link in just a second, we came up with kind of some student themes that we saw from both the principals and from the Culture and Climate team. Culture and Climate team, as you know, is again one of those subcommittee teams that has met since we started rolling out and operationalizing the strategic plan. And that team does have representation from every building in the district. So that's really nice. Often, I mean, it's a mix. It's principals, it's paraprofessionals, it's teachers. And so it's a mix of people very passionate about culture and climate, equity, et cetera. So with that, I will share just a brief kind of overview of the fall of 2022. So the Culture and Climate team looked at kind of student themes from the fall of 22. Again, this is fall of 23 that we're looking at now, but from fall of 22, respect and safety were kind of the two themes that emerged, which is not surprising because much of this is our current strategic plan, right? Feeling safe at school from the moment they get on a bus to the time they get home. What does that look like? How do we address that? And then respect was student to student, student to staff, and staff to student, and those were just general themes that came up. Just a little backstory on this, every building principal looked at their own data that fall by building, and then we came together and collectively said, what do we see as themes across the district? This is what was kind of emerged as the fall data in terms of student themes. So our 4 categories, equity areas that we're focusing on, belonging and access, agency, and identity. The general student theme across both principals and culture and climate, we're creating a district-wide culture of care. And what that looks like, I'll share a little bit more on the theme results. The other one was around agency and identity, and it was more professional learning in various areas for staff and potentially students, and then more student voice opportunities. So are you able to click on that?
I can.
And if I can, I'm sorry, I didn't realize I could do that. So the 4 categories, we're talking about at the top, just access to physical resources, experiences, services, and information that students have to be able to fully participate in learning. And what we have down here in the 4 categories, just scroll real quick from the top to bottom. Belonging, they're kind of grouped in these categories. Belonging, keep going. Agency, and then identity. So those are the categories, and they kind of explain what each of those are. So if you go back up to the top, just to orient you to the document a little bit, on the far left are kind of the categories in blue of the themes that we just kind of mentioned. So for instance, professional learning, scroll down a little bit, English language learner support, parenting classes, etc. In the middle is kind of an example of what that recommendation is. There's like a theme in blue, kind of a recommendation or an action step. It might be train or develop or co-create or establish. So they really try to be specific about the action step, again, that came up both from culture and climate team and principals. The middle is an example, and then on the far right is the recommended team and really goal area from the strategic plan that either is already in progress, is going to help us kind of retweak or reinform what we're going to do moving forward in terms of a strategy. Or it might be something new that that team will be wrestling with in terms of a systematic district-wide approach. So for instance, under social emotional learning example here, develop a district-wide restorative circles model or create a morning circle. So there's an example in the example link of a morning meeting and what that would look like in terms of doing that in every single K-5 classroom. So the behavior and emotional support team would be taking a look at these things that are over here on the left in terms of action steps. And so really that's the next step after we've just done this work, is to start this month getting with the team lead. So I meet with each of the team leaders of each of these district teams on a weekly basis and start tackling with each of these teams how we go about implementing this. And again, much of this are things that are already working or already in progress, but there are a lot of things also on here that we need to reconsider. So how do we kind of move the needle in a different direction in terms of strategic plan strategies and be able to implement this and do it in a way that's systematic. We're not overwhelming people doing it all at once. So, what's the timeline for implementing this and what does this look like? If you go down a little bit further, if you notice, there's several things about student voice. I mean, we already have the Superintendent Student Advisory Council, which is an awesome first step of, recognizing student voice. We have student voice through district teams across the district. Dr. Van Wagner and I are meeting with a group of BIPOC students and talking with them as well. Marshall Collins from the ISD is coordinating with us. So we're looking at other opportunities to be able to have students share their experiences and help them feel more connected, for instance. So we do know that one of the examples might be a question that I often ask in a discipline hearing is, what adult did you feel like you could go to? Was there one adult that you feel like you could trust and go to? And when the answer is no, or if the student didn't feel like there was somebody they'd go talk to, I do feel that we had some of that reflected in our survey where we had, a good portion of students that said sometimes, always, or never, that they don't feel like they belong. So how do we help students feel more connected, and what does that look like? And I do think, again, being more intentional in addition to Superintendent Advisory Group and these groups in our buildings, create spaces for students to be able to share their voice and actually see the things that they're recommending come to fruition. So I will pause there for a minute. I'm not going to go through every detail of this, but more will be coming out, obviously, as we update. I think we're doing the June update strategic plan at the June board meeting, so much of this will be an update of the progress of these teams. So the next step is to meet with each of these team leads and talk about, how do we implement the recommended strategies, programming systems from both the culture and climate team and the principals.
Good.
Questions I can answer?
No, good update, definitely.
Great.
Yeah, I love this, the Digital Promise touch point, just kind of the thread being throughout a lot of our stuff. It just is nice to have those follow-ups and updates, so thank you.
And the items that the student survey responses, the teacher responses, the student experiences compared with teacher-reported competencies, and the top priorities for teachers and students that we share with principals and culture and climate are on your table. So
Yeah, that's great.
if you have any specific questions on those or would like to talk more about that, I'm happy to sit down with you and talk more or debrief on that.
Okay, perfect. We will move into celebrations and successes.
We have a lot of celebrations. So Central Grade did a National Acts of Kindness Day where students wrote letters from every class to Central Grade neighbors and then placed 23 different packages to porches around the school, which, what a cool thing.
So cute.
Had so many just awesome responses from community members on this.
When I presented on the bond to the Central Grade Neighborhood Association, this was like they were like, this was awesome. They, you know, some of them brought their letters, you know, that they got from the kids.
That is cool.
It was
What a
just
cool
really neat.
idea.
It was
this
really
is a new
cool.
idea. We've
I
never
think it's
done
gotta
this
be, I think it's gonna
before.
end up being an annual event.
Yeah, that
It's
is
just such a overwhelming positive response.
That's so great. That's great. It's such a neighborhood school, so it's cool to
Yeah.
like.
Yep.
You
So
know.
how are you going to do that at Blair?
Well, that's not at
I don't
Blair.
know that
at
it's
Gotta
one of
figure
those
out-
unique
school.
things, I mean, but
Typically,
yeah.
but this is a start, and so
Yep.
sometimes when things start, it's wildfire, and
Yeah.
we'll see.
And some things are unique to each building,
That's
depending on where
right.
they're,
That's right. Was
situated.
this
You know, like
yeah,
the
Gianna,
farmer's
this-
market out at Cortade,
That's
you know, it's kind of
exactly
unique
right.
to that space, but
And cool for Jana Duguay,
Yeah.
right? Was this her idea to
I
kind of?
don't know whose idea started it.
but
Jana
very
or
cool.
The building, I
Jim,
don't
the
know.
building.
I don't
Maybe
know.
it might be from their building leadership team, I'm not sure.
Okay, but still, again, I think it is great
Yeah,
that
maybe,
buildings have
yes,
their
that would be a
own-
student voice opportunity. Maybe the
Yeah.
students said we should spread kindness around. I don't know.
Right.
Well, it's also nice to coordinate between the community
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
students.
Yep.
That's awesome.
And I'd like to see more.
Yeah. We are also celebrating the TCAPS Montessori adolescent community who were practicing their consumer skills. They took turns being servers and customers and then reviewed percentage increases with sales tax and tips on checks. So that was a fun, exciting day that we heard about as well. Obviously, real world practical skills there. Traverse Heights recently hosted a festival where I know that Mr. K, principal, talked about technology and screen time, trying to, you know, talk about realistic times at night and you know, the other things that students could be doing, like reading in the evenings versus being on screens. And this is planned to be an annual event, and they had opportunities to visit classrooms and learn more about what students are doing during the day. East Middle School fifth graders had a 5th to 6th grade information night. So this is an example of what we do with both sides of town in terms of 5th graders coming over and having an information night and just getting acclimated to the middle school life. Just an awesome community support for our injured student athlete at West. This is just another, as you've seen on social media, just the student body coming together to support the recovery of Brady.
So great. They're a good family friend of ours, and
Okay.
oh my gosh, just the amount of support and. You know, like I know our ski team all wore little ribbons with his number from regionals on because he was injured on that Friday.
great.
And so just I mean, oh my gosh. And like the Cadillac kids coming to visit him and like, I mean, support from coaches all over the state of Michigan that came to see him and support the family. There's a big fundraiser coming up for the family. So yeah, really great.
That is so amazing.
Yeah, and this was so sweet when the West kids all, you know, Brady sees all that stuff, so it's so great. So
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Glad to hear he's on the mend.
yes, yes, yes.
So we had Garfield Township Planning Director come and speak to Central High's TIE 10 program about land use planning and just kind of how this is applicable to Traverse City and what that looks like here is, you know, the master planning of Traverse City. So that was an exciting, again, real world experience for students. We also want to celebrate Officer Noland and Deputy Henges for it was National School Resource Officer Appreciation Day, February 15th, and these two are invaluable resources in our high schools. Just the amount of time, energy, proactive relationship building that they do with kids to kind of just even be preventative, but to just be those boots on the ground with kids is just so invaluable. So we just want to say thank you to both of them and for all the work that they do every day with our students and administrators, teachers, and for our community. And that's it.
Good. Lots of celebrations and successes. That's awesome. And we'll have, gosh, with all the sports that are happening right now with divisionals,
All
and all that
sorts.
stuff is happening right now for our winter sports team. So that's great. So
And the musical that's coming up, is it coming up?
In March, yes,
March,
at
yes.
Central High School.
yep.
It's coming.
Yep. So all good stuff. Well, good. Any other questions or comments or anything? No.
Robotics is starting to get going as
Yes,
well.
and I have to.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
good.
And our, you know, the forms, and well, I know this is curriculum, you know, they poured the forms, I think they're just about done at West High School for the new innovation manufacturing labs with the weather.
Yeah.
Construction's gone well.
Yeah.
So they should start forms soon, I think, over at Central. And so you're really gonna start seeing literally the building blocks go up not before too long, to be able to see that. So it's been exciting to go over there. I peek out the window, I go down to that wing and look at all the forms, and you can see the shape now of what all the rooms look like, and pretty exciting.
After all of our conversations about where those labs would be at each
Yeah.
school, I gotta say, just both schools are so prominent as you come into the.
Which was the purpose.
Yeah,
right? We
I
wanted
mean-
to see. You
Yeah.
wanted to see that and celebrate that element. So
Yeah.
when you pull into each school, it's not in the very back,
Yeah.
and like it has been,
Yeah.
or upstairs, and you had to bring the elevator, to try and get a robot up
Yep.
sideways, so it'll be really exciting when they're done.
I was talking with Heidi about, when they won a banner, was it at West? I said, that should be in the sports hall.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Your robotics banner should be
Yeah.
hanging where all the
Absolutely.
sports stuff is.
absolutely.
Yeah,
So they're gonna be front and center to our buildings, and that's cool.
yeah. The problem with West Athletic Center is in the back of the building.
To the very back, yeah. So
So
they're
maybe-
gonna get the first crack.
Still,
They're gonna get the first crack at seeing it when you pull in.
That's
so,
right, that's
But
right.
it's nice that they have it too, because, you always get the reports that West looks like a prison.
Yeah,
But this will actually have that.
It will.
open,
It'll have more
really
windows.
looking-
Yeah.
Yeah,
More
it doesn't
windows.
look like a prison to me,
well,
but that's
it's
what
just there was a
the
time on
kids say.
architecture when there was just so many things institutionally built. And then inversely, when Central High School was built, it was 5 different buildings and a California concept, right? So it's and bond discussions with people. It's been so interesting to hear the stories of in the wintertime of people running from one building to another, in the wintertime and going, in that, and so
Kids wiping out and
yeah.
in between where the awning or the
Right.
roof would take, and you'd
Yeah.
come out the door and it'd be sheet ice, yeah.
So it's been interesting to hear those stories. Are so different. So bringing some, closure a little bit to Central High and bringing some more openness to West High, I think are good things.
Be nice.
Yeah, exactly.
I would also just like to publicly thank Megan and Kelly Walter for their work. I know this looks like an easy, everything comes together meeting, but they are often like herding cats to try to get both for board meetings and these meetings. So
yeah.
I just want to say thank you because they come in and it's seamless, but they do a lot of work
It's
behind the
so true.
scenes.
Oh my gosh, and the last minute text messages from, it was truly of like,
So
"What's
thank you."
happening?" Yeah, truly. And always filling the gaps when we have board members or committee members that can't attend. So great.
On
So
that note,
thank
she's
you.
looking for one right now.
I'm full up. this
Working
week.
down the list.
That's right. That's right.
I'm in
Hasn't
every
talked to you,
meeting
she
this
might.
week.
Are you? Oh, gosh. Well, good. All right, well, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Our next curriculum meeting is Tuesday, April 2nd, here, 8:30 in the morning. So thank you, everybody. Perfect.